Okay, well, we're going to get started. It's 12:01 in Southern Ontario. Want to welcome everybody to our ongoing Tuesday Talks series. We have the pleasure of having, again, another one of our own, Colleen Killingsworth, to talk about change management. Colleen's been in this field, in this area for a number of years, really focusing on helping organizations help their stakeholder groups manage change in either workplace or business direction, really focusing on how do we get the optimal behavior outcome that organizations would like to have, and stakeholders would want to have as well. Colleen has, as many of you know, has a very esteemed career in public relations and service to our community. Before she did her MCM, she was national president of the Canadian Public Relations Society, and she served on a number of boards in both Canada and the United States, and has been a long and dear friend and research collaborator with me. So I am very, very happy to have her talk about this passion of hers in demystifying change management. So it's over to you. I should have played David Bowie's song underneath it while we were doing it. Over to you, Colleen.
Changes. I won't sing for you, I promise. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And what I am hoping you guys will take away from today is why manage change and not change management. I do like to use manage change because so many people see change management as fluffy and not necessary, so they discount it right away. And others see it as kind of a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach, and that's definitely not what it is. Whereas I believe managing change is about change leadership and managing the people risk in order to achieve benefits realization. I should say I've got about 25 slides. I am happy to pause and take questions on any of the content along the way. So don't hesitate to post a question. Terry will interrupt and we can take it from there. So just a little bit more on my background. Really, after completing my MCM, I did an 18-month stint at the University of Calgary to help stand up the new Vice President of University Relations. As I was looking at transitioning out of that role, the opportunity to support a business transformational project at a major oil and gas company came my way, and I grabbed it. Little did I know that would be the beginning of a pivot in my career. I discovered through that project, and many to follow, that managing change really taps into all of the competencies I had gained from this program, and I was hooked. So before launching into how to manage change, it's important to understand why so many change initiatives fail. Change initiatives fail usually because they are lacking one or more of these factors. They lack leadership and leader alignment, and there is no clear executive sponsor. They lack an understanding of what the current versus future state is and what needs to change to achieve the desired state. They lack a commitment to manage and properly resource the change. That's always a big one. There's no implementation plan that supports the people side of change. Too often, process and technology solutions are thrown over the fence with no regard for the people required to receive them. There's also a lack of consideration for potential risks and clear plans to mitigate those risks. And we all know the saying, culture eats strategy for lunch. Underestimating the impact of culture is really a critical mistake. Managing change is really about managing people risk. When you consider people, process, and technology as a three-legged stool, you need all three for stability and for the end user to achieve the value of the solution. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard CIOs and their teams say, If it weren't for people, this project would have been successful. Managing the people risk ensures that adoption and sustainment of the change and achievement of benefits realization and a return on investment. So managing change is really about understanding your stakeholders and how they will be impacted by the change. It's also about understanding what their concerns, fears, and perceptions are, so you can build an action plan that not only mitigates risks, but works to ensure people understand the why, what is changing, and how they will work differently in the future. So there's several change levers in our toolbox that we can draw on for to support managing change. And these will really vary depending on the size and scope of the change. But having a good governance structure really enables leaders to make informed, integrated business decisions that deliver on the business objectives. You do need that executive sponsor that's very visible and able to make decisions. You need change leadership and leadership alignment. And that's really about defining what needs to be achieved and how leaders will work together to realize the benefits of the change. You need to complete an impact assessment that identifies the magnitude of the changes and their impacts on stakeholders. This is really key to stakeholder management. And it's really interesting. When I first started into change, you'd have the change team run off and wanting to do the stakeholder impact assessment. And I'm like, but I need to do my audience analysis from a communications perspective. And that's really where it became very clear to me that doing this work in an integrated fashion was really critical. Then you need the engagement and communication plan that tells a story, including what the changes are and what they mean to me, the so what. And by telling the story of how the project supports the organization strategy, using scenarios and employee-focused examples. It will also clearly identify the key stakeholders and the outcomes required for successful project execution and sustainment. The plan will ensure leaders have the communication tools they need to talk to their teams about the project benefits. Then you need a training plan that supports the overall project goals. The training approach should parallel the project methodology, meaning that it will provide alignment with project cycles. And readiness and measurement. This approach really would track the behavior change movement on the change curve and user adoption and provides meaningful data for leadership. There are 6 key buckets of activities in managing change. Defining the business case for change, defining what is changing, current to future state, completing a stakeholder impact assessment, developing an integrated change plan, change training and communications, defining measures of success and KPIs, and developing a sustainment plan. Now, this may be a bit of an eye chart, but really what it's showing is what all of these activities are, the content that would be included in the documents, and what it informs. So the case for change, current to future state, and impact assessment really inform that integrated change plan that takes into account people readiness, training strategy, your communication strategy, stakeholder engagement strategy, leadership alignment and engagement, and measures of success. It also informs the larger project plan. And this is really where it's important to show what the dependencies are on the project plan and the work that needs to be done in the integrated change plan. Then when you implement the plan. It really helps inform adjustments that need to be made to plan just based on reaction and input, the lessons learned, and it also informs the overall sustainment plan. The measures of success and KPIs really inform the project metrics, and the sustainment plan itself informs business planning and performance agreements. So how it all comes together on this plan on a page, it really shows that all of these activities are driving to ensure that those who are impacted by the change have been engaged, know what is changing and why, and what it means to them, understand what they need to do to prepare for the change, know how to do their job in a desired state, and know their role in ensuring the benefits realization. So you'll see at the top, communications and engagement is critical all the way through the process, from project start and stand up to project wrap up. Managing stakeholders. From a change management perspective, again, it comes back to, it's about people. Segmenting your stakeholders and understanding each stakeholder group is critical. And then plotting them on the change curve. And the change curve itself is really moving from unaware, aware, understanding, acceptance, commitment, and sustainment. Not all of your stakeholders are going to need to be at each point on the change curve at the same time, but really understanding and segmenting them and being able to map them out helps you understand which groups you need to get where by when. One of the activities that is really effective as well in some of your engagement sessions is using that change curve to have people do a self-assessment and identify where they believe they are on the curve. That also helps you understand any gaps that may need to be filled. And then doing a heat map of your stakeholders is also important and helps to inform the level of engagement activities that you would need to complete. When you look at readiness criteria, this model is really based on, are you awake? Are you willing? Are you able? Are you knowledgeable? And are you equipped? These questions really help inform the readiness of the organization. They can be used in pulse checks, training evaluations, and give you some good data to report back to leadership on the organization's readiness. If the project is going through the project management stage gate process, these questions and the outcome of them really help inform that stage gate. Are we ready to move to the next gate? Is the organization ready to receive the change and able to sustain it? And when you look at measuring change, it's really a balance of measurement types that will ensure a broad perspective on benefits realization. You can measure the effectiveness of the change itself through surveys. How did people receive the change? Was it well received? Were they ready? To leading measures to predict future benefit of the change. KPIs should really be leading measures. You can measure time, cost, and quality, and input, process, and outputs. Have you really realized the process improvement you may have set out to achieve? So when you look at change leadership capabilities, you really need a good executive sponsor that can authorize, legitimize, and demonstrate ownership for the change. This is a role that I've seen often lacking. They may step out to begin with, and if they have resistance from other leaders, then they kind of turn and walk away. But you really need that executive sponsor that can really establish and communicate the business case for change and monitor the progress consistently. Change champions usually are that next layer of leadership that, and they really need to believe in the change and want the change and be able to be out there and champion the change. They should be excellent communicators, be able to influence the business and share knowledge about the business with the project team. Change agents are often kind of that manager level and or influencers within teams that are willing to step forward and help implement the change and help in the planning and execution. They are really the eyes and the ears of the business and the voice from the project. So they play a dual role of providing input into the project as well as back into their teams and business. Quite often you'll pull on these change agents and develop like change networks or influencer networks to really help the project. It's more of a grassroots approach. So achieving benefits realization is really a shared responsibility. Everyone has a role to play. Understanding the culture is key to achieving the behavior change required. Leaders really need to lead the change and be seen to walk the talk. Their actions need to be consistent. The change team includes the change network I mentioned, and those who have been tapped on to help facilitate the change. They also need to be very consistent in their actions and very supportive of the change. And those who are impacted by the change need to be willing and able to make their behavior changes required to realize the benefits.
Colleen, just before we go into that, so question what became as when you go back to that last slide.
Yes.
So can you give us a sense of, where's the distribution of failure around that kind of spoke? Where's it most likely going to come from your perspective?
Well, I think number one, it's the lack of leadership, time and time and time again, because without that strong leadership, then you're not going to have somebody that advocates for the proper resources that really can define what the desired state is, and take the time to understand the people side of the change and the risk. It comes down to leadership every time. So
it goes to, hey, we need to do this. This is where we have to get to. Just do it.
You got it.
Right?
Yeah.
So rather than really looking at this as a planned, internal execution of strategy, right? If we want to be able to get to that end point, that we have to be able to do this. And that hurry. I mean, I think human behavior is, can't we just hurry up and get there?
Right. Pull the Band-Aid off and let's just be done.
Right? Why can't we get on the same page? Just write a newsletter and just say, hey, we're moving. Get over it.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And quite often, you'll have a leader step out to take that executive leadership position, and then they delegate the authority down. Mm-hmm. And it gets watered down, and people's own perceptions and biases come into play, and you lose that storyline, the strategy behind the why. So that's failure from the leadership standpoint. So say if an organization does all that, is committed to that, but yet doesn't achieve the change, suggests that maybe the audience or stakeholder groups weren't ready or willing to change. Well, that's where culture gets in the way.
Right. So where's that biggest barrier, right? Because we know that we as humans don't like change. right? Even if it's a change on the way we drive to work. So getting us to change, where do you think from a end target, so that those that are employees, for example, where's the biggest barrier to change from an employee standpoint, regardless of whether or not the organization commits to that entire strategic mandate, right? And doesn't fail. They have the resources, they have the leadership support, they've done the impact, but we didn't get there. What's the barrier from the employee standpoint?
It often comes back to leaders again, their direct leader, and not. Yeah, it can be a combination of things. I've seen it as kind of the direct leader or manager not providing the same amount of support that, maybe coming down from the top. Inconsistency in the way that they talk about the change and support they provide teams, to even just being absolutely stuck in their ways. And I know in the past project I was on, there was a lot of resistance to the change. I'll share with you, and it was really around kind of a culture of entitlement, varying degrees of leaders opting out of the objectives for the change, and it finally came down to the CEO saying, if you're not on board, I will help you find another job.
Right. That sense of accountability from all those different levels, right? That leadership
Absolutely.
has an accountability, middle management has an accountability, and employee has an accountability. Just two other points, comments, both from the Ottawa Gatineau region. Tony said, I would think that innovation and technology are going to play a bigger part in change management moving forward. Right. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, two of the larger projects I've worked on have been IT based. They're enterprise resource planning projects, transformations. But again, it comes down to you need that people, process, and technology. And you need to really be focused on all three legs of that stool. And quite often, innovation and technology, those projects, if the change leader or executive sponsor of those is the CIO, people get in the way. So they want to skirt around people as much as possible. And I know this is a broad generalization, but what I've experienced is it's easier to throw the solution over the fence and hope somebody catches it, and then blame people for the failure of the project or not being able to sustain it in the long term. So I think I totally agree. IT and innovation are going to drive so much change, but it all needs to be approached as that triad of people, process, and technology.
Right. Marianne Leduc says, agree. I've seen so many great plans that become dusty. People want to check a box in the list, but don't keep it alive on the long run. Middle leadership is often hard to engage. So again, what we talked about, making sure that you get buy-in from all of those, especially if we know, research tells us that we as employees look to our most immediate boss or supervisor. And if they're not on board, if this is, their attitude is, oh, this is just another flavor of the month. Here we go. Change your clothes. Here we go. We're changing colors. So I think that's good. And then Gail said, change takes place one individual at a time. This is another big role in the projects that have failed, right? Making sure that we're monitoring. And I guess, I like how you talked about that, then that notion of KPIs and this dashboard that people can see as moving towards that level of change. And then Ilda says, some companies have dedicated change management teams, often reside within HR. Do you think this approach is effective? Going to tip my hand on how I feel about this with my next question. Does it give leaders an easy path to delegate their critical role in change management to somebody else?
It absolutely does. Yeah. And I think, for it to be successful, every leader no matter where they are in the organization, has a role in leading change. And they need to build those leading change capabilities and competencies.
Yeah. That's it. We're up to date. Oh, Martin says he's got to check out because he's got to go teach. He's got to run and teach. Thank you for a great presentation. So much to think about and change about our approach. I especially like the idea of shifting our thinking to manage change.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Martin. All right. So again, possibly a little bit of an eye chart, but the last big transformational project I worked on was a head office relocation. It was supporting a large oil and gas company here in Calgary. They had 5 different locations for their Calgary office, and we consolidated everybody into one location. We occupied 25 floors of the building. We had to build out each of the floors. The design principles behind the workspace was to provide 12 unique areas to work on each floor. So some would call it open concept. We really called it mixed use because there was a variety of places people could work. So some of the issues we encountered really included low people engagement, siloed work environment, bureaucracy and inefficiency, and complicated and static workflow. Our integrated change management objectives were to ready our people, foster acceptance and adoption, and drive improved performance. The targeted outcomes include a renewed people experience, optimized tools and flexible workspaces. So there was a big IT component to this, improved team effectiveness, and sustained cost leadership. So what we did is we conducted a concrete floor tour in July 2018 to provide staff with a sense of space, natural light, and views. We conducted a team effectiveness survey to better understand how teams work, the types of space and storage they required, and the opportunity for co-location. The outcomes really supported the development of a stack plan. We developed an integrated change management plan in partnership with Workplace, Modern Workplace, that was the IT program, Health and Wellness, Learning, Diversity and Inclusion, Enterprise Security and Emergency Management, Organizational Development, Leadership Development, and Internal Communications. We developed a stakeholder map to track sentiment and engagements. We conducted a baseline readiness assessment to determine stakeholder understanding, level of engagement, readiness, and sentiment about the people, place, and technology transition. We stood up an influencer network, that was our change network, to serve as a feedback loop for change management team and to assist in championing the change and providing coaching to peers on the new ways of working. We conducted numerous tours with leaders, influencers, and key stakeholders to gain buy-in, feedback, and answer questions. We set up a workstation demo and to gather feedback, which resulted in escalation and increased change leadership. People set their hair on fire. We did a leadership roadshow. We conducted lunch and learns and really helped support the establishment of neighborhood norms. We developed a targeted team on 6 activities to support leader and staff preparation for their team moves, and a T+16 leader engagement plan to support adoption of the new ways of working. We conducted 2 post-move surveys, one at T+2 weeks to assess satisfaction with the move, and one at T+10 weeks to assess impact on performance, accountability, and engagement. We developed a catalog of workstation changes to provide leaders and staff with options for adapting their workstations to support performance. And we created unique pages on their internet to provide staff with information and answers to their questions. We developed a set of workplace principles to ensure safe, engaging, and fiscally responsible workplaces. And we defined the role of workplace team and partners, leaders and staff to uphold the principles. We remain true to the MOVE objectives of supporting cost leadership and renewing the culture. We built a MOVE plan in 3 phases to allow for downtime, recovery, and ability to pivot on the other business needs. And we tried to avoid long weekends to the extent possible. We conducted lessons learned following each phase and adjusted the approach for the next phase as required. We hosted milestone event and a sneak peek for leaders, admins, and influencers as part of the opening of the amenity spaces. And we hosted milestone thank you events for members of the project team. And we always had good representation from senior leadership to acknowledge the contributions of the team. So that, that's everything we did. And we really, the post-move surveys really helped us to understand that we did move the mark on overall engagement based on the move. And the majority were really satisfied with the space and saw that it did increase transparency within their teams, accessibility to their leaders, and productivity.
So that happened before COVID. Is anybody working in that office right now?
Oh, you know what? It's no, we were all sent home on March 13th. Yeah, it's really, really an interesting time. I know they are working on their return to workplace plan. Right. The workplace, I think, will look a little different, but yeah, I'll tell you the one benefit of all the work that we did, among others, was the fact that part of this project was to enable all employees, all Calgary-based employees with mobile technology. So when we were sent home, it was lift and shift and right back to work. They didn't have any of the downtime that many organizations experienced without, the proper technology and tools to support their teams. They were in the process at the beginning of the year rolling out Teams, so they just accelerated that, and yeah, they really didn't miss a beat. I know there's other organizations that I've heard of that were still on desktops and didn't have any of the technology to send their people home with, so did lose a lot of productivity.
Well, the interesting thing is that they actually have a benchmark now, right? In terms Absolutely. Of what the expectation is for communications about returning to work as well. So that level of transparency and buy-in and performance. So yeah, an interesting time to do it. Now, how do you recoup that into this new world as well?
Right. Well, and it's been really interesting too, because they were well equipped. They've done some informal pulse checks, and people are saying their performance has increased. And they not only tested or reported their own performance, but rated the performance of others. And there's increase there. There's increase in engagement and satisfaction. So yeah, it's been interesting.
An interesting part of this whole change management perspective is the importance and value of research to be able to establish what the framework is before, to engage in different kinds of activities, communications, then measure progress along the way as well. So when you talk about communications playing that central role, that kind of lifeblood role, did you use research to test any unique different messaging with different groups to be able to understand what works with highly engaged people versus messaging that works with highly or low engaged people?
Oh, not in this instance, but yeah, I have done that in the past as well. We did know, though, through all of our engagements, we would informally, be testing tools and messages and tweak, where we needed. But yeah, and the success or not, it's really interesting too, because the way we stacked and did the moves, some of the first moves were rockier, more resistance to the change. And then the latter moves, because we were starting to get a large community or population in the building, the latter moves were faster and easier for people to kind of settle because they had already gained experience in the space. And I think some of the earlier groups that we moved in were some of those that were a little more entitled than others. So it was harder to shift from your individual office to more of a neighborhood.
Right. It would be interesting if you could segment audiences or groups by levels of acceptance to change, if they were seen to be credible people within the community as well, right? So that if they are the early adopters, right, the lead through this, then their move went smoothly, and they can speak, they can create a narrative. Then others move along that continuum of trust as well through that.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, the stack plan doesn't work that way, though. But you're right. And you know what? And that was the whole intent of developing that influencer network. And that in itself is really interesting. Language matters, as we all know. I've always called it a change network or change champions. But the team decided to go with influencers because they thought that was probably would land better within their culture. But what it did is it actually set up an expectation for those people that they could influence the project team and change what was going to happen to the organization versus actually influencing their peers to come on board. So language matters.
Would you use that term again?
Never.
Never.
No.
Okay. And so you'd go more back with this sense of change ambassadors or change agents or change connectors.
Yeah.
Right?
Champions, network.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think language does matter. And, if we as communicators are asked to provide that language, then we better know what that is and what that research is. And so, that's where I think as you go through this, you're consulting, or even people in the MCM community can start to gather that knowledge, right? That empirical evidence that we can begin to draw some kind of correlation between, terminology, phrases, narratives to the expected, outcomes as well. So that might be something that, and if anybody's followed the work of Cass Sunstein in his work on behavioral economics or behavioral theory, it's about, how do we get conformity? It's through these small measurable communication devices that we would use as well. And again, not one message fits all of those groups. You truly have to understand what pockets of support you have and what pockets of resistance and what message works for that group as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to pick up on something you said as well. And that's truly what I've really loved about the big, hairy transformational projects I've been on, is the opportunity to do lots of research and to ground everything in data. And we had so much data, especially coming out of the second survey, that we were able to slice and dice it and hold it up against their last organizational health check. So we could really show, where things had kind of moved, some of the correlation, and then what they should be anticipating seeing in their next org health check. And started to get into Power BI and the power behind that and what you can really do to, but we had some teams, some leaders were really engaged and a bit surprised by the results. So wanted to, take a look at their team versus the whole. So sliced and diced all of that for them. And then just doing more of the business analysis. So I feel half the time I'm not even half the time. I probably have about 6 hats on at times. It's between project management, change management, communications, coaching, leadership development, and being a business analyst.
Right. Gail says super users, network champions. Josie says change coaches. And then Gail clarifies saying underlying this group is still the one who most influences the end user, but the name does depend on the culture of the organization.
Totally agree.
Yep.
All right. So a little bit on what I'm doing now. Through that project, I had the opportunity to meet an organization named Better Workplace. And it's a 20-year-old organization that has recently been purchased by a benefits company. And they have a tool called WorkFit. And yes, Dave, I use so much of your group weekly research. And yeah, it's been awesome. And the IPR stuff. But basically, WorkFit is an assessment tool prior to COVID that was really used to help organizations that were interested in developing a workforce mobility program to assess their employees' interest and ability to work remotely. So I've been helping them kind of pivot their business to react to COVID. And we've been built in some COVID questions. They've got a number of reports that really help show the gap of technology, furniture, software applications between the office and the home office, employee work profiles. And one of their big things has been to really show kind of that impact on the triple bottom line, where employees are more satisfied, they're saving money, you're reducing your GHG footprint and such. So when we look at, this is an example of one of the assessments we did for a parent company. And it's really looking at the return to workplace and what employee preferences and concerns are when considering returning to the workplace, and how frequently they would like to work from home going forward. So there were some surprises in here, I know, for the CEO, especially around the preference for a number of days working from home. And then we were also able to assess the challenges that they were having and identify some of the gaps in working from home.
Just to talk on this one slide, I think the middle bullet is one of the most important considerations for workplaces today. How can you help me with childcare? Right now we're in summer, so that's a busy time for parents. It's a busy time for the kids, and work has to continue to be done as well. And then September, who knows what will happen in September? So I think how are works really adapting this, because usually childcare has been left to on the shoulders of the parents to play into that. But now that you're not forcing, but encouraging people to take this opportunity and maybe even supplying them with the technology to be more productive, one of the biggest barriers to productivity is childcare.
Yeah, and homeschooling, and we've built that question now into the assessment itself as well. Is what other considerations need to be taken into account when consider working from home? You've got adult care. Are you caring for elderly, parents? Are you caring for children? Are you homeschooling? Do you have? And you can't outright ask it, but are there other concerns like, are you immunocompromised? Do you have your own healthcare concerns that need to be taken into account? So yeah, again, it goes right back to the research and the data, and it's really quite interesting. So with that, what we touched on was why manage change, and the change leadership capabilities that are required, and how to apply it, the change principles to supporting organizational change. I think we covered that.
We did. We did. This is a fantastic presentation, Colleen. Obviously a great uptake, lots of interest in this, communicators having, really to position themselves in that strategic management function. This is change management is you said those different hats that you wear, right? You're a communicator, you are a relationship builder, you're an influencer, but you're helping the organization move through an emergent strategy to this new position, right? And that, that when you talk about physically moving change, but that is also marketplace change, that is leadership change, that is ways of doing business change. So it becomes incumbent upon us as communicators really to understand these different models of change that are critically important to getting the desired effect that the organization truly wants to have. So this has been very, very good. And I encourage people to really reach out to Colleen to get a sense of what any other questions that they might have or insights as well. But we'll open the floor. We have a couple more minutes to answer any questions, if you have any.
Or any of your own experiences you want to share. I know, again, there's no one size fits all. And I think, to me, having worked with some of the large agencies as well in some of these transformational projects, I mean, you learn a lot from them, some good, some bad, some, what you don't want to repeat. And I think it's advocating for the employee and for the people throughout the whole process that I really love.
What do you think is the most important, or a group of competencies and abilities that communicators need to have to be able to enact this role as a strategic counselor on change management?
I think business acumen, first and foremost, understanding the business and the strategy, really helping leaders be able to articulate that case for change and what is changing. If you can get in there and help with that, things do kind of flow from there. But if you don't understand the business and you don't understand, where they're trying to get to, it's quite difficult to be able to articulate that case for change or the desired end state. And what I've seen quite often too is business or organizations will declare what the desired end state they want, but can't tell you how to get there because they don't know their current state. They quite often haven't mapped their current processes. Current processes have been bastardized by technology processes and the workarounds, and they'll introduce the great technology platforms, but people are still using spreadsheets and managing off paper because they haven't been trained to use the new tools, or the tools were introduced without really understanding the full process and how to get there from end to end.
I want you to think back to your University of Calgary days and understand culture in an academic setting, or even put it in your healthcare. I see Tammy's video up and thinking about the changes in local health integrated networks in Ontario. And when the decision comes down, that organization leadership doesn't own the decision. It might be the province, it might be the board of trustees that just said, this is where you're going, deal with it, right? Our pivot to online teaching was not a decision that any of us had any impact on and wasn't strategic, it was reactive. But there's a huge, remember those days at Calgary, right? So
yeah.
Right, getting faculty to do stuff that they don't want to do. But, even, Tammy in the local health integration networks where the province just said, this is what you're going to do. And so it's not
I think,
a strategic purposeful, it's a reactive.
Right.
yeah, and I think, Terry, you know, your job as a leader in the organization is to support that, and you know it's your mandate, so you have to do it. So how do you do that in such a way to convince folks to come along with you and to follow you? And so I think, Colleen, you know, your message about the people being, and in my experience has been the people are the most important part of how we manage change. And in particular, those frontline leaders. And of course, those frontline leaders are influenced by the people they report to. So if I'm the vice president and I come into a room and you know, my whole attitude is, this is awful, and, you know, God, we have to do this, you know, how am I gaining that buy-in for the change? It's not fantastic. So I think that's our job as leaders in the organization, is to, when we're given those mandates that, you know, potentially we might struggle with, how do we reframe for everybody so that we can bring them along?
Yep, you're bang on. And it's that, we call it the pocket veto. You know, the leaders will be in there, and you think you've got alignment and you think you're reframing in your instance. And then as soon as they walk out of the room, they kind of pivot and go the other way, and you know, their employees see that, so they're not going to buy into what needs to be done to implement the mandate. I think it's that change leadership role it's critical, and it's hard, you know, because you're not always going to totally believe in it, but you know, you need to either find that safe spot and that circle of safety, you know, to express your concerns, or but then be able to come out and really, you know, walk the talk.
Yeah, great presentation, Colleen, and thank you everybody for your comments. Gail has been lighting up the chat line. She's had some really great impact or suggestions and commentary as well. I just want to give a heads up to everybody that we're going to take a pause next week. It is our first virtual residency. So all of our focus will be on ensuring that we deliver an engaging, enlightening, and a valuable session to those students that are in courses. We have data science with Alex Sevnier. We have Jackie Hornwig teaching reputation management, and Melissa Eckerly teaching leadership communications. I'm teaching the capstone course because Philip Savage is on research leave starting July 1st. So if anybody wants to audit those courses, you are free to do that. I know I've had a number of people that have reached out, but just reach out to me and I'll check with the instructors to see if they're okay with that. The second other announcement I have to make is that after residency, we are launching about an 8-week program on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the public relations industry. I have to thank Gail, Charlene, and Sarah Goldvine for their desire to really drive these important topics. The three of us spoke on the weekend, and we came up with a great series of presentations on institutional racism, anti-Black issues within the workplace, Indigenous issues, LGBTQ aspects as well. And so we're gonna roll that out starting on the 30th, and Gail's gonna lead it off. And so just watch out. We're gonna put together a big poster and again, share that within our community and then make that available for the larger community as well. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, or if you feel that you want to make a contribution to this, please reach out to me as well, and we'll fit that in. Thanks a lot. Wish us luck on our first virtual residency. I don't think it'll be the first and only. I think we are probably going to have to be that way in the fall too until this gets cleared up. But we're all working hard to make sure that our students get that same residency experience. Unfortunately, we won't be going down to any winery this summer, but wait for next year and we'll have a really great visit again to the Niagara region as well. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk soon. All the best. Thanks for
Thank you.
participating.
Thanks, Colleen.
Bye.